It actually started for me when, as a 10-year-old, I was playing cricket in our colony with a group of my friends, and then the boy who was batting, having finished his batting, he wanted to leave. So everybody tried to stop him because that's not done in cricket. If you bat, then you must field also. So everybody stopped him, and then he said, "No, Baba, I have to go for my tabla class. I'm not going home, I'm going there." So when he said that, my ears pricked up. I was suddenly, what is this? Let me also. So then I said, "Okay, I'll come with you." So that is my musical or rhythmic journey began when I first visited my Guruji with him. And I was just a spectator that day, and I saw him play. I saw Guruji, the way he handled him and the other students around. This was in the year 1956 when I was a 10-year-old, and my Guruji's name was Pandit H. Taranath Ramarao. He was more popularly known as Pandit Taranatji in the musical circles and amongst his friends and contemporaries. Right from my childhood, I had that uh, rhythmic instinct in me. I would bang on cots and uh, tables and all that without realizing what I was doing, but in rhythm. But it all came to a stage where it gelled, and then I thought I must do this. So when I went home, I told my mom, and she agreed readily. And next day, we went to Guruji's house with the required flowers and coconut and all that. And then from there, it started. He held my hand, he kept it on the tabla, and he said, "This way you play, you get na." When I did, there was no sound. Then he said, "This is thin," and then this is ti, ta. He gave me these 4 syllables, and he said, "You just keep your hand on the tabla and try to play that." But there was no sound. So I was getting frustrated. So I said, "Why am I not getting a sound?" He said, "You will get it, don't worry, but don't put tension on your hand. There should be no stress. It should be absolutely stress free." Then when I kept it and then I gradually played, I could hear something. So from there, everything started. The first day, I was only playing these 4 syllables on the tabla. And then the next day again, he called me, and once he was satisfied with that, then he gave me the daga, and he put my hand on that, and he told me, "This you have to, it should be like the hood of a serpent, your hand. And then these two fingers you use, and the sound you will produce is gay, gay." He made me say that, gay, gay. And I prayed that, again no sound. And then he said, "Stretch your hand and play this." He said, "This is K, K or ki, ki." So these 1, 2, 3, 4, then na, tin and ti, ta. These 8 syllables I was supposed to sit and practice when other boys were banging on their tablas and they were playing whatever they were taught. So that was my first experience with the instruments, with my Guruji. And I saw the way he so lovably, told the kids, instructed them, "No, don't do this, child. This is not the way. You are not supposed to lift the finger. You are supposed to do this." He would demonstrate that, and they would try to follow as best as they can. Then, after about 3 or 4 days, then when I was more confident, I could get the sounds. Then he showed me other sounds, and then he said, "Now play your ge with na together." So that was the first joint syllable. Dha. He said, "This is dha." He made me play it 10 times. Dha, dha. And then he said, "This is thin and ge. Together you play dhin." So these 2 syllables are very important, he said. It is dha, then, dha, dha, play this, then, dha, dha, then, da. He gave me that cycle. He wrote it down. He had a very beautiful hand. He was an artist. So, deviating, he had come down to Bombay from Mangalore to do a course in arts, commercial arts from JJ School of Arts. He completed that, he got the diploma, but in the meantime, he got hooked on to tabla and his whole career changed. He had forgotten art, but of course it was there with him, but he didn't pursue it as an occupation or as a profession. But he was a businessman. He and his elder brother, together ran a snuff manufacturing unit in Mangalore, and they were doing very well. They were exporting to Europe and other countries in Europe and USA and all. So he was there basically after completing his course to manage the business. He was so taken up by tabla and music that he started ignoring his business, and more lavishly he would spend on music, artists, and he at one time had a palatial house in one of the busiest districts of Bombay, Lamington Road. He had two huge cars, Daimler and Benz. Now this is what I've heard from my father, who was a good friend of his. When I started learning from him, he had moved into a one-room kitchen tenement in a society called Sonawala Buildings, close to where I stayed in Talmakiwadi. So from that status, from that level, because of his losing business and spending more on musical activities and hosting prominent musicians, his business slipped, and so did his level of living. What I heard from not only my parents, from many other people, was that in that stage, in his affluence, he had hosted people like Ravi Shankar and Ali Akbar and Pandit Kishan Maharaj, Shanta Prasad, all these people who, whenever they came to Bombay, they would come and stay with him. He hosted them for days together because they were not getting programs, one after the other. They had to stay. Today there's a program, maybe next month there is somewhere else in Bombay. So they would rather stay there, and so for days together he would host them and be at their beck and call, do whatever they want, serve them whatever they want. He never did anything for his personal gain, although he was himself by that time a proficient tabla player. He never expected them to return favors by taking him for accompaniment or something. Of course they did it because of his proficiency. He was good, and he was a person whom they could get on well on tours and on concert, on the stage, because he didn't have an ego there. He went as per their instructions and he followed them, and he has given good concerts with them. I've heard one or two recordings of theirs. He came down to a state where he had to only rely on tuitions, teaching. He joined Bharatiya Vidya Bhavan when it first started with Principal Pandit Sadanand Nagarkar and SCR Bhatt and KG Ginde. This must have been in the early 50s, because when I joined his class, he had already stopped going to Bharatiya Vidya Bhavan. Of course, Bharatiya Vidya Bhavan activities were going on, but he didn't get along with the principal because Chidanand Nagarkar was a very strong-headed person, and they didn't get along. So he resigned and he started teaching only from home, his home. He would get students morning, afternoon, evenings, anytime. And he never discouraged anybody, any student, saying that no, this is not the time, I can't teach you now. Anytime a student came, he would be prepared to sit with him and have him, teach him and have him play. So for me, the time was in the evening because I had to attend school. And the moment I came home at around 4:30, I would just throw my bag away, have a cup of coffee and run. I would be there till at least 8:30 at night, and then return home. And those 3-4 hours, it was, I don't know how time passed, magical. I came to a state where I had, crossed the initial, what you call, the beginner's level, and I had started playing the bowls that he taught me, the way he said. And then at that point of time, he made me play with lehra, and he himself would sit with a small harmonium on his lap and play. And this he would do not only to me, to everybody. There were 6-7 people at least at a given time. And that is how I learnt playing with his lehra. He would recite a bowl and he would say, see, this is the first part, dhet, dhet, dha, tirikita dhet, ta. He would make me recite that, dhet, dhet, dha, tirikita dhet, ta, the whole composition. Then he would recite the whole composition and tell me to recite it. In 1 or 2 tries, I would get it. And then he would say, Shabas. Then he would say it again, say it again. And then he would say, now try to play this. You know how to play dhet, you know how to play tirikita, now play dhet, dhet, da, tirikita, dhet, ta. So made me play in snatches and then complete bowl. And the moment I took out my book to write down, he said, no, don't do that. You memorize that, you say it 10 times if you want, play it 20 times if you want, but don't write it down. So this is one thing, he insisted that I should not write down, but he would allow others to write. So I don't know what was Then one day he told me, he said, son, I found that you were what he called ek party. That means once you heard something, you had the ability to grasp and stay that and retain it. So I wanted to encourage that and not get you to write down, because once you write down, you become sort of complacent that it is there and it goes out of your mind. And then once I tell you to play that again, you'll have to refer that and you'll recall that. But still, I don't want that to happen. It should be in your memory chamber. Whenever you want, it should come out if and as you want it. So that was the training he gave me, and as I told you, 3 to 4 hours at a stretch. Not only me, others also were there, but everybody was doing their bit. About his talim, I have just heard what it was and what he has done, who he has learnt from. But when I went to him, he was not learning from anybody. Apparently, when he came down to Bombay, he started learning from Subrai Mama Ankolekar. This Subrai Mama Ankolekar was a disciple of a great ustad called Munir Khan, who had also trained very prominent tabla players like Ustad Ahmad Jan Tirakhwa, Ustad Amir Hussain Khan Sahab, Ustad Shamsuddin Khan Sahab, Ustad Habibuddin Khan Sahab, and a number of well-known, recognized names. So this Subrai Mama Ankolekar was one of them, and he was supposed to be a very good teacher. Now Guruji spent something like 12 or 13 years under him, and he remembered him. Every now and then he would say, Subrai Mam was like this, Subrai Mam used to do this, Subrai Mam. Then after that, after Subrai Mam passed away, he started learning from another Guru Bhai of his, Ustad Shamsuddin Khan. Shamsuddin Khan was a very popular tabla player. He was more known as an accompanist to Hirabai Badodekar and Abdul Karim Khan, that Kirana Garana's vocalists. Apparently, it is said that in any concert of Hirabai Badodekar, one section of the crowd near the tabla player used to be Shamsuddin Khan's followers. I mean, they were so enamored of his playing. He was such sweet, his tone. He could, as they say, reproduce Hirabai's singing on his tabla because of the baya, control of the baya and tabla. And in Vilambit Ektal, she used to give him the liberty to play. 1 full hour he would play solo, which is very difficult. If you count then at this speed to play 1 hour 12 matras, a solo, and she would encourage him and the crowd would love that. So he was very well known on, and Guruji was impressed with that, and he did his Ganda Bandhan with Shamsuddin Khan Sahab, and he studied with, and that Ganda Bandhan program, even to this day people remember. To this day means to that day when I was learning. Senior tabla players like Pandarinath Nageshkar and Yashwant Kerkar, whenever I went to meet them, they would say, "Arey, your Guruji did this kind of a Ganda Bandhan." He said, "We have not seen anything like that. He gave your his guru, his ustad, a Guru Dakshina of 500 silver coins, and hosted. There were a number of dignitaries and musicians, and they had a good session music. And then Shamsuddin Khan played solo, and it was a wonderful event. Everybody remembered those days. It was held in his flat where he was doing, he was doing well those days. And then these were his two prominent gurus with whom he learnt, and also he tried to teach us whatever best he could from those, whatever he had learnt. But he also impressed upon us that be yourself. When I tell you something is good, because I feel it is good and I feel you should do it. But at the end of the day, it is you who are playing, and you have to express yourself on your instrument. So do your best and see that this comes out to your satisfaction. Because if you are satisfied, you can rest assured the crowd will be satisfied. Now, I used to go to him every day of the week. Even Sunday, if he welcomed it, if I wanted. But my parents told me, at least give him one day for his family. Don't bother him so much. But 6 days in a week, from 4:30 to 8:30, I used to be with him. And with him on the lehra, practice with him. So my riyaz time was 4 hours a day, 6 days, and for 6 years this went on till I completed my intermediate science. And then that was the time I had to go to Pune, because my parents had decided I would be an engineer by profession. So till that time this was my schedule, and I was wholeheartedly with it. And he also welcomed it. And he made me into, at that point of time, one of the finest young tabla players. Because people like Zakir Hussain also were that at that point of time. But it was me who won the President's Award in the Akashvani competitions. It was All India Radio then, first prize in 1964, 63-64. And then I got an opportunity in my first year of college. I won the intercollegiate competitions in tabla, and I was selected by Bombay University to be a representative of a delegation sponsored by UNESCO and the Union Government of India to go to Europe, a students' delegation. After that, when I returned, I had to go for my engineering, and there ended my sojourn or journey on tabla with Guruji for some time. He was there, of course. I used to visit him whenever I visited Bombay, but not to learn tabla. As a courtesy, I used to visit him, inquire after his health. So, but then there came a break with my engineering, which continued, unfortunately, After my graduation, I took up a job with Mukunda Iron and Steel. That's no longer now. And then after the job, I started my own business. So this continued till around 1988. In the interim, I got married, and but tabla was out. I used to play tabla occasionally if people asked me to, but otherwise I didn't have a tabla set with me, no riyaz. So this was a very bad period for me, because deep in my heart I wanted to pursue tabla, but for reasons not in my control, I had to go and do something else, which I was not happy with. So ultimately, at a point where I felt I could take my own decisions, I decided that I will pursue tabla, and I told my wife, but she was also serving. So she said, you go ahead, I will continue. So from there it started, and then this was a gap of around 22 years without tabla. So when I went to Guruji, I told him, this is what I have decided. He said, you have my blessings, you can continue. Whenever you want, you can come down and sit, and we can discuss, or you can learn something. But when I started, I had to practice. When I started, I found that I couldn't play for 5 minutes at a stretch for two reasons. One, I didn't have the train of thoughts, because what you play, you must have in your mind. I would take up something, within a minute I would get tired, go to something else. Third thing, it was not steady, and I didn't have the stamina. Then I went back to him, and he said, don't worry, you do one thing, you know how I taught you, you go through that cycle. Whenever you feel like playing tabla, you see which is the first qaida I taught you, you play that qaida. Don't try to be good in it. Try to play as a beginner, how you would play. And then when I started, then he said, now you start teaching. You teach them like you learned from me. And then that was the time when Jayesh came. So he was my first student, and he was also my contemporary in learning, because I also learned along with him. What I taught, I learned. So there my second innings started as a tabla player.